So, well,
Yeah.
again, thank you for being patient. Thank you for taking a minute out. I'm really looking forward to getting into Moonpads and your history and being an entrepreneur. So, thank you.
Yes, of course. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. So, before we get into your company and your life as an entrepreneur, I want to know first and foremost, 4 years ago, the pandemic was really, we were trying to figure out how we were going to get out of it, how it was going to affect us. How did you ultimately get out of it, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
Well, you know, my work has been international work for the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
and that all came to a halt with the pandemic. But actually, it's also where Moonpads kind of began as an American company, because during the pandemic, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was this big tampon shortage.
Yeah.
There were all these shortages of general hygiene supplies, right? And I was stuck in America for the first time in like 20 years. I'm used to being abroad a lot of the year.
Yeah.
And so finally, I was looking at American shelves for hygiene products.
Yeah.
And I realized there was white space in the market for what we had created in Tibet.
Yeah.
And so it's actually where Moonpads began as an American company, was actually out of the pandemic. Plus, I had more time because I wasn't traveling across the world.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually invested the time in Moonpads, and it's kind of acted as this sweet bridge into an American life for me, because I no longer go back to Tibet because US Chinese relations really hit the bottom with the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's really changed my life. And coming out of the pandemic, for me, it's just kind of like been a transition to a kind of a new life.
Yeah. So let's get into exactly what you do for a living on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Right. So I work in communities that are not as privileged internationally, to bring them what they need. So Tibetan nomads had asked me many years ago to help bring them clean water, more access to healthy foods, to access to schools and hospitals. And so I work for a nonprofit trying to accomplish those tasks.
So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Oh, I fluctuated a lot as a child. That was third grade, was probably marine biologist.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Did you pursue any of that?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. By the time I was in high school, I was super into Tibet and just focused my energy on getting out there. And that has been my adulthood.
So, what were the seeds early on in your life? Take me back to where you were born and raised, and what were the seeds that were planted that gave you this desire to go to Tibet and to make this your life's mission?
Well, it's hard to totally trace, but I think, I was raised Catholic,
Mhm.
went to Catholic school, and so there were certain ethics of like generosity and service that were instilled in me at a young age. But then I kind of started questioning a lot around Catholicism. And I began reading more and more and more about Buddhism. And Tibetan Buddhism just really intrigues me. And I started just meditating and getting into it that way. And then we had a speaker actually at our church talk about Tibet. And that, I think, was probably the first turning point. And then, quite honestly, the real hook was music. And have to be honest. It was the Beastie Boys.
Cool. Yeah.
The Beastie Boys were really into Tibet,
Yeah.
and they came out with some amazing songs that incorporated Tibetan music,
Hmm.
and it shifted my world.
Yeah. Have you seen them live?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. How was it when you saw them the first time?
Oh, amazing. So fun. I mean, they are entertainers, and
Yeah.
that was when Adam Yauch was still alive.
Yeah.
Wow, what a show.
Yeah. The first time, growing up in Kansas City and kind of being in that Midwestern vibe, I remember the first time I went to California and I was in a hotel room and it was in my early 20s and there was a book of Buddha in there. And I remember picking it up and I read it and I loved it. And it was such a contrast to what we're taught in a
Right.
lot of ways, that like with Catholicism and levels of Christianity in this country. And it just resonated. It made sense. I've always been a real fond, um, believer of the way that they roll and the way that nature happens and just all of it makes sense. It makes much more sense to me than anything else.
Right? That was exactly how it appealed to me. I was like, well, I was already thinking like that.
Right.
I'm not forcing myself to shift and think a certain way that the church is like, think this way. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's hard for me. That's
Uh-huh.
a leap. But with Buddhist philosophy, I was like, yeah, that's logical.
Yeah.
And also the whole deal of like, I mean, nobody's trying to be like, be Buddhist, call
Right.
yourself Buddhist.
Right.
They're like, if you like this philosophy, just,
Yeah.
it's here.
Yeah. And there's a level of peace to it. There's an inherent level. It's like I'm always hesitant when someone says something too much and they don't do it.
Right.
But the Buddhism way is like it genuinely imbues that. Very early
Mhm.
on when you start reading the scripture and the words, you start feeling this level of calm and peace that's just a part of the theology,
Exactly.
you know. So, who's been a hero for you? Who's been somebody that's inspired you in your life?
Oh my gosh. There have been a lot. There are people at really high levels, right? That, I read about in books. Gandhi was one of these people. I mean, quite honestly, talking back to like third grade, if I go back to the first grade, what did I want to be? I wanted to be a saint because that was, what I was reading, what I was given is my storybooks
Yeah,
were like the stories of the saints, right? So like if I'm gonna say like high ideals of who really has inspired me, life stories of Gandhi, life stories of Malcolm X, people who have really been huge change makers in this world. But then in terms of people that I've actually worked with, um, I had a professor in college that she worked in Burma, Myanmar, and um, and she was working in conservation, and it inspired me so much because she was making such an impact, making sure that forests just weren't clear cut. And she's gone on to be a dear friend and serve on my board of directors for my own nonprofit and come to Tibet with me. And
yeah.
so she's been somebody in my life that has inspired me very deeply.
So, of everyone that's alive on this planet right now, if you could meet a change maker, someone that's inspiring, who would you love to meet and spend time with?
Oh, that's hard. Wow, you didn't give these questions to me
Uh-oh,
beforehand.
sorry. We can come back to this. We can come back around to this.
No, I mean, oof. I only one choice. I think because I think we have some good work together, Oprah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, she's a change maker, that's for sure. That's for
Yeah.
sure. So every day you wake up, what's your motivation to do all of this work that you're doing? Because you're giving a lot of yourself to help a lot of people, but you also have to keep some back to evolve as a human being. What is that collective gumption every day for you to do this work?
For me, my purpose in this world is really to try and not do harm and try and help where possible. So every day I wake up trying to improve the world in a way that I'm able to. So really like thinking, what are my skills? What can I do? Not trying to think too grandiose, like, oh, I can, you know, change the world in these huge ways, but in my daily life, like what actions am I taking? Because I think a lot of the time as humans in this present day, it's very hard not to do harm.
Yeah.
And Moonpads actually came out of a mistake where I was doing harm and I recognized that. Um, so it's all like little corrections, like everything I have to consume to live. And every time we consume, there's a side effect of that, which is often negative impact. So, like,
Yeah.
how am I offsetting my negative impact? How am I trying to create a positive impact? Every day I just wake up kind of psyched to try again. It's a
Yeah.
huge challenge to have a positive impact on this world.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Stop worrying about things that I can't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just if I can change something, then why am I not changing it? Stop worrying about it, just change it. And if I can't change it, then it's a waste of energy to worry about it.
Yeah. So, of all of the things that you've done to create change, what's one of your favorite success stories?
Well, that's that's tough, but
Let me phrase it like this, I guess. What was something that you did that really made you grow a lot? That was a big leap for you? Maybe it was a mincing of being really difficult and then really satisfying, but you really grew and you didn't know it at the time. But when you look back, it was a big leap for you.
hmm. So at one point, I moved back to the States in 2008. Uh, the Olympic protests in China kind of moved all foreigners back from China back to their home. So I came back to the States. I landed in West Philly and I started working in West Philly schools from Tibetan schools with
Wow.
living with nomads in
Wow.
an area with no phone, no roads, no running water, no electricity. I landed in West Philly and I started teaching in schools in West Philly
Mhm.
and running community programs. And as a white woman, to show up in a Black community and be like, I'm an educator, that was, I was like, but I'm not. I'm I'm here, I'm learning, I am trying to be, an advocate for more equality because our schools in America, particularly in inner cities, particularly those that serve Black children, are um, way worse than any school I've seen across the world.
Wow.
Even schools that don't have school supplies, right? Like schools that can't afford a book are better off than the schools that I was working in West Philly
Wow.
because these are schools that are so underfunded. I mean, sure, there's a building, but those buildings have lead pipes. They are, streaming water fountain water that's toxic. They are not air conditioning. air conditioned for children during the summer. You know, kids don't have school supplies, even though they're sitting in a classroom, and teachers are managing a classroom of 33 students to one teacher. So that was my big challenge. And I ended up loving it. And we co-created this amazing program. And I learned so much from this kind of, I can't really say what Freedom Schools has become. It's like an organization now, but it's also a movement.
Yeah.
So we joined the Freedom School system and started really, hiring on teachers and facilitators that could teach that according to like African American history and social justice. And I still keep in touch with some of my students, and it's such a joy to see how being part of those community schools really assisted them in blossoming into who they are today.
So in all of these adventures you've been on and all of this evolution that you've had as a human, what are you the proudest of?
Hmm. I think being able to support Tibetans inside of Tibet, even when it has become increasingly difficult to do so, demonstrating to them that their culture is precious and highly valuable and deserves to survive. Not only deserves to, but must, for like the health of this planet. And so really supporting them and demonstrating that to Tibetans inside of Tibet has been, I'm honored to do that work, and I'm proud that I've been able to do it.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow, this is like more of a therapy session
This
than a
this is the therapy
podcast.
question. Yes.
Hey, ooh, um, I've actually had a problem finding the words for this, but I think it's it's both a Meg pro and con. It it's that I'm optimistic to a fault, like almost like ungrounded in my optimism.
That's
Like I,
no, that's
yeah.
interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. That's a great answer. No, go ahead.
And sometimes that's like across the board,
Yeah.
in kind of every situation. It can be my work life, it can be my personal life. I'm always like, well, this is possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, knock knock, Meg, like, hello, this actually isn't possible.
But isn't one of the most important things for us as humans to hold on to is hope?
I agree, exactly.
I mean, I was talking to someone a little while back that just was like, "Hope? What do you mean hope?" Like, when you don't have that, it's like the heart of a child. Like, I always remember the quote from Charles Bukowski that said, "We're born geniuses and buried idiots." And it's like we put all these walls up around us. We close everything off, and if we can keep that heart and that hope and that that dream that we have, that's what we have to protect.
Exactly.
you know, because it's intact. So, speaking of the dream, if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, help out, get educated, any of the good business, where can they go?
So we're online at Our Moonpads. moonpads.com. Our handle on socials is we share it, Moonpads. And that's a great way to connect.
Okay, excellent. Meg, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your passion. This has been refreshing. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's
You
great to
bet.
meet you.
Great to meet you. And